Welcome to Supercool, the show about real-world climate solutions that cut carbon, boost the bottom line, and improve modern life. Each week on Supercool, we go behind the headlines to pinpoint the stories and data accelerating the low-carbon economy in towns and cities across the U.S. and around the globe. I'm your host, Josh Dorfman. Stay up to date on Supercool episodes by tapping the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening. Pay attention to the climate conversation long enough, and you hear lots of stats meant to grab your attention. Buildings, we're told, are responsible for 40% of all global greenhouse gases, so it's imperative we do something about them. But then some other agency comes along and says it's 30%. Then we're told transportation is 29% of greenhouse gas emissions. But wait, if we divide and segment emissions another way, suddenly it looks like 20%. Ag, 10%, but then lump ag, forestry, and land use together, which I guess makes sense, and you're at 22%. But that same pie chart, suddenly transportation is a whole different number. The point is, it's just not clear. But one thing is certain. Whoever's telling you the number is probably picking that pie chart where the thing they care about the most is the biggest number they can find that's published by a credible agency or scientific body. But I think for most people, the number doesn't really matter all that much. We get it. They're big. It's cause for concern. And the truth is, they're really not all that shocking most of the time. I mean, if we just think about it for a few seconds, it's clear that 8 billion people on Earth live, work, and play every day, nearly all the time in buildings. So the fact that buildings use a lot of energy, consume a lot of resources, have a big climate impact, yeah, okay, it makes sense. But there are some outliers, things that do shock us with how much greenhouse gas emissions they emit. Cows are one. It's very hard to fathom that cows are like climate change's enemy number one. I mean, for a single species. Though, if you ask the cows, they probably have a different perspective, suggest we take a look in the mirror and consider who's actually to blame. It's not like cows are over the moon about all the extreme weather they increasingly have to deal with out in the pasture, thanks mostly to us. Then again, it's not like humans belch 220 pounds of methane every year. That's gross. And it's a greenhouse gas 28 times more potent than carbon. Now, I tell you how much cows contribute to climate change, but if you're following here, you know it probably depends on the pie chart. Whatever the number is, it's nuts. And yet, there's another greenhouse contributor, similar in some sense to burping cows. Only this one underpins everything. By which I literally mean everything. Your sheets, your shoes, your socks, your toothbrush, coffee mug, your phone, your TV, your rug, your lights, your fridge, your food, your car, your house. Everything. And because we need it to make everything, it causes far more greenhouse gas emissions than anything else. Do you know what it is? It's heat. Nearly every single thing someone in some factory in some part of the world makes uses startling amounts of heat to make it. We know the main culprits, steel and concrete. They're talked about a lot. And again, depending on the pie chart, you'll see a number that's up to, say, 15% for all greenhouse gas emissions for just those two. But there's lots and lots of industries and industrial processes that rely on heating something up to, say, 100 degrees or 200 degrees, up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And nearly all of these industries rely on fossil fuels. So whether it's heat literally as pure heat for their process or heat as steam, it's very often coming to them in the form of a boiler and very often from natural gas. So one of the most important climate questions now is, how do we decarbonize all this heat? How do we get rid of the boilers? And the answer is batteries. But not like an electric car battery. That's a lithium-ion battery. That's too expensive for manufacturing. The economics don't work. It's a special battery that specifically stores heat, just heat. You can store it in hot water, you can store it in sand, you can store it in bricks. The company we're speaking with today, Brenmiller, stores it in crushed rocks. Brenmiller is an Israeli company working all over the globe to bring its heat batteries to many different kinds of end users, given how many different kinds of industrial applications there are. As we'll hear about today, in Hungary, they're working with a pet food company. Back home in Israel, they're working with a bottler for Heineken for beer and Pepsi for all sorts of sodas. It's a diverse and fascinating customer mix. And Brenmiller's heat battery, which is also known as thermal energy storage, from the outside looks like a clean, say, modern shipping container. On the inside, pipes are circulating warm liquid throughout the rocks to heat them up and store that heat at very high temperatures for hours or days as needed. Now, while every industry knows its dependence on fossil fuels is a major climate contributor, manufacturing is still a slim margin business. There's not a lot of budget for major capital outlays to swap out legacy systems for something new. Plus, the risk appetite is low. Manufacturers typically don't want to rely on new technologies, even if they may be superior, if it means injecting uncertainty into proven processes. Brenmiller works around these constraints, co-locating its batteries next to a customer's current source of heat and gradually becoming a bigger part of the process as the tech gets proven out. Plus, it's now turning to a heat-as-a-service business model by which the company puts one of its batteries outside a manufacturer's facility and just provides the heat at the precise temperature, pressure, and form that the manufacturer needs it, only charging for that heat. Meaning Brenmiller assumes all the capital risk, making it easy for customers to gravitate to these new types of batteries and key technology in our race to the zero carbon future. We're joined today by Doron Brenmiller, a company co-founder and its chief business officer. Here's our conversation. Doron, welcome to Supercool. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right, so let's start with the battery, the technology. For many people, the most visible kind of battery that we know the most about is like a Tesla Powerwall. We're charging cars at home. I guess that can also do utility, but that's like a lithium ion battery. We hear a lot about that. But you guys are doing something entirely, well, I don't know if entirely different, but definitely different on the technology side. So I think that's a good place to start the conversation. Just give us an understanding of Brenmiller's battery, your technology, and how that works.
The easiest way to explain what we are doing is to think about it as a heat battery. So our batteries on our phones, our computers, our cars are all storing electrons in usually a chemical battery, as you said, lithium-ion and other types of chemical batteries. But we are storing heat. And we can talk more in a minute how we store this heat. But the basic idea is quite simple, actually based on studies that are done many, many years ago of storing high quantities of energy in the form of thermal energy of heat in a certain media. So it's very similar to what we used to see in saunas or in water tanks. We have taken the same principle of storing heat into the next level of storing heat in a very condensed way, very efficient way, both in terms of cost, of energy density. But what stands behind it is this very simple idea of taking, in our case, rocks, filling these rocks with thermal energy, storing it, and then using it. And not all of us are aware, but heat is a very big part of what is compounding our energy use around the world, or as a result, our emissions. Over 50% of the emissions that we see comes from burning fuels to generate heat. So storing heat has a very big part in trying to decarbonize the world. And we have one solution that I think does it very, very well. As I said, it's based on crushed rocks. So it's heat batteries that take in different forms of energy. We can take electricity, for example, heat up these rocks to high temperatures, about 1,000, 1,300 degrees F. Store this heat for as much as needed. It could be an hour, 5 hours, a day or two, or even more. And then we discharge this heat to be used either directly as heat, and not all of us know, but heat is a big part of all the food that we eat, the consumables that we use, the products, They use a lot of heat in the process of generating them. In steel, in metal, in plastics, in food, in pharmaceuticals, they all consume a lot of heat. And of course, we also consume a lot of heat for our own heating and other type of solutions that we need in hospitals, in residential buildings, etc. So the basic idea is that I said, taking heat or electricity, storing it in the form of heat, then releasing this heat again to be used directly or to be converted in some cases. This is the basic fundamental, and using very abundant, clean, low-cost materials that have also a very long lifetime, because a rock will always have a longer lifetime than a battery. And we all know the lifetime of batteries from our watches, from our computers, from our phones. It does not last forever. It does not keep the same performance forever. But thermal storage, in our case, or a heat battery, typically have a very long lifetime, recyclable. There's a very small carbon footprint in the production or generation of these units. And decarbonizing heat using this technology can become a really big part of the effort to decarbonize and to get to net zero.
It is amazing when you peel back the onion or kind of dig deeper into like what makes our civilization work, what drives our industry, and then you get to this notion of heat. And so for Brenmiller, if we figure out a way to heat up crushed rocks, the rocks can store heat. And when I see your product in a very elegant, condensed space, something that could fit into a factory very easily, or as you said, a hospital or some other location very easily. Okay, you have this battery, like how do you go build a business around it? You have to be able to heat to very high temperatures, but you also then have to be able to deliver that heat basically like exactly the way industry gets their heat right now. And so that was something I found really fascinating about your technology. Can you talk about that and like what gets customers excited about you and how you actually do deliver exactly what they want, how they want it?
Sure. You are right. Typically, most of our customers are either utilities or facilities that are quite conservative. They've been using the same method to produce heat for decades, using their boilers. They trust their boilers, they know how they work. And now you're coming and telling the guys, I want to electrify your heat using this new technology, this thermal energy storage, this heat battery. And trust me, it will work. And heat is really key to their business. So it's not a small improvement. It's a real change for them. So we need to come in a way that is seamlessly integrated into their facilities. At the beginning, typically, we work in parallel to their existing heat generation methods, if it's boilers or other types of heat generating facilities. Then once they feel they can trust the equipment, they typically abandon the gas or they keep it as backup. So that's a good thing about it. It's not completely changing the infrastructure in a way that they cannot go back. It's working in parallel to their existing equipment, just stepping in and operating and replacing either part of their heat generation or all of it. But the idea is to gradually take them off the fuel they are using, typically gas or other types of fuels, but give them the comfort that they still have the control and the backup. And the second thing we need to do is, as you said, we have to come with a competitive solution. We cannot say here, electrify your heat or decarbonize your heat, but it's going to cost you 2 times, 3 times. And I like what you said at the beginning. A lot of times we are waiting for some future solution like green hydrogen that will come always 5 or 10 years from now. But we need to ask also what will be the cost. How is it going to compete with the cost? Because the customers want their energy clean, but they also want it to be at least at par or even save them money. If you don't come with this solution, then you are really working on a very small niche or segment of clients which are really willing to pay more for their heat. So we are trying to tick all the boxes. Yeah, I'm going to give you a reliable solution. It's a proven technology. It's clean. It's providing clean steam or heat, but it's doing this at even a competitive cost. And now how we do it is a bit more complex because just plugging in thermal storage to your socket, providing clean heat, usually will not bring attractive numbers. Usually will cost more than the alternative. We have to be more sophisticated in how we do it. Come with creative business models and different services, both to the end client, which is consuming this heat, but also to other services we can provide to make the economics work. And I'll touch upon that if you want. We can talk more in depth, but the idea here is to use this storage, like batteries, by the way, also evolved from doing one type of service, for example, energy shifting, to other types of grid balancing and grid support services. And also thermal storage can do the same. There are increasing number of hours when there is excess generation, when there is a high renewable penetration. This leads to very low cost electricity in some hours, but also to a need for more measures to balance the grid. And thermal energy storage could be a great way to do it. We can charge at the lower cost hours, or we can reduce load from the grid and get paid for it. And in Europe, for example, there is already well-defined mechanisms where we can participate in the grid balancing, grid flexibility services, and get revenues from this. And as a result, by getting more revenue streams than just selling the heat, I can come to a customer and give him a better deal for his heat. And this also leads us to another business model which becomes more and more attractive, which is heat as a service. We come to these clients, we tell them, you don't need to take any technical, any market risk. You don't have to worry about a new technology. Let us invest the money, develop the project, sell in a long-term 8 to 12 years agreement, the heat to you, the clean heat at a competitive cost, and you don't have to worry about anything. Just give us this commitment, you will get what you need. And we can do it in a growing number of countries today because of the energy balancing services, because of the volatility that enables us to capture the low cost hours. And this is a real advantage of thermal storage. We can just charge 4 or 5 hours a day when the rates are really low and provide clean heat around the clock in a competitive, clean way. So all of these things, the energy as a service contracts, the grid balancing, bring us to a place where you can really reduce risk in the eyes of the customer. He doesn't have to worry too much about the new technology, because if it doesn't work, he's not paying us. And he's always going to have his backup if something goes wrong. We see it as a business model which is really moving ahead in many countries, and we are working to push it forward with our technology. We don't need to wait many years for the markets to develop. In the US, I would say it takes a bit more time because the market structure needs to allow thermal storage. So we need to see some more advancement in the US market, which allows TESS to fulfill its full potential and offer this solution to the industrial clients.
There's a lot to get into there. That it's certainly in the US. I know Brenmiller did a project with SUNY Purchase, which is really interesting, and we'll talk about it. And that's also about capturing some waste heat from a cogeneration, which is also like 20 minutes from where I grew up. So I was like, oh, SUNY Purchase, that's cool.
You should visit.
But I plan to. I'll go with you. Yeah. And I know the U.S. Department of Energy has helped underwrite like Rondo Energy and other kind of thermal energy storage, do a project with a bourbon distillery out in Kentucky. And it's really interesting, but still early days in the U.S. What's interesting about your role as the Chief Business Officer and looking at Brenmiller, you're setting up projects and building your business pipeline all over the world. I know there's a focus to how you're going after industries, but you're taking on a lot. But to come back to what you said about the business model in Europe and some places, I know you have a project you're getting underway in Austria that I think relates to this heat as a service. So maybe I'll just ask you to talk to those details so we kind of get a picture of what this actually means, what kind of customer, what's the application. But that's what's exciting today about this moment, 2025. Brenmiller, as I understand, was started 13 years ago, 2012, I believe you're founded. And so you've been building the tech, building the competence, building the team, to get to this moment. You then have policies in place in like Europe and elsewhere that are making it more viable for these kinds of technologies to come to market, because you can say, well, here's our core tech. It works. It's going to deliver a great product. And there's these other things we can do. We can work with the grid. We can draw some dollars or some euros there, right? And we can therefore have a really strong value proposition to this customer. And so that's what makes this like such an interesting moment to scale these kinds of businesses. Tell us about the project in Austria, this heat as a service. I mean, it's a concept that none of us have any familiarity with, but it is fascinating. As you said, it de-risks so much for that customer to make it easy for them to say yes. Who is that customer? What are you doing?
We spent the first years of the company developing the technology, commercializing it, building different products and different applications in different markets, including the Sunni projects, because at the beginning it's all about proving that the technology works. So we passed this stage in the previous few years to show, okay, it's here, it's working. Now let's find the right application to focus on and the right markets to push this. And at the beginning, we tried, as you said, heat recovery, hybrid charging, steam charging, different types of applications in power plants. We did a project, as you said, in New York with the New York Power Authority, in Italy, in a combined cycle power plant with Enel and others around the world. And in the recent years, we've seen a lot of trends in the market. And when we started, nobody talked about thermal storage. Nobody knew what it means. We had to always compare ourselves to batteries. It was really a different ball game. And now in the last few years, we see more and more attention to this field. More companies, more investors are interested. And we also see the market becoming more and more mature in understanding what thermal storage can do and accept it. And then we see the business models, as I said, evolve. And I think the project we have in Hungary is the most advanced. Yeah, it's in Hungary. But it used to be the same country.
Don't talk to us about history, man. This is not a...
No, just about the future.
Okay, so Hungary, yeah.
Why do we select Hungary as a place to start with this heat as a service and grid balancing approach? Because it's a country which has a nice percentage of renewables, but it's not interconnected with its neighbors. They need a lot of balancing mechanisms, and they have a lot of different structures to compensate these devices like thermal storage, which can do this balancing. So we've been working in this market to try and secure clients. One of the largest pet food manufacturers called the PPF, which has over 13, I believe, facilities around Europe. They produce very high quality pet food and they wanted to go green. And Hungary really provided us the great platform to enable to give them a very competitive solution in terms of carbon reduction and cost of heat. So we're able both to save them significant funds, to offer them a very interesting solution, and also contract with the grid operators to provide grid services in a very competitive way. And after Hungary, well, it's a bit technical, but Hungary was also one of the first markets to allow thermal storage to participate, because up until 1-2 years ago, because of different regulation and definitions, which are still relevant in the US, you could not participate in the market as thermal storage to electrify heat, meaning that you had to reduce electrical load and bring back electrical load to the grid in order to be eligible to participate. Now, in our cases, we want to remove electrical load but bring back heat to our clients. So this is the change that really opened up in Europe, and Hungary was one of the first places when we can really participate in the grid balancing. And now it's relevant for most countries in Europe, and we are working to get it relevant also in the US. But this really opened up the opportunity to provide these grid services, to bring, to play in the market, and as a result become highly competitive and offer the energy as a service in a 12-year contract to PPF. And it's really seamless for them. As I said, we are actually sitting outside their fence. We are building our own grid connection. We are just bringing a pipe over the fence to them and providing all their clean heat instead of their existing boilers. And we are interconnected on the other side to the local grid and operating vis-a-vis the local TSO to offer the green balancing. So we are really in an interesting solution when we balance the grid on one hand, we serve this client on the other, and we actually build a nice asset which also shows nice value to investors. For now, it's still first of its kind in terms of the business models. We don't see dozens of projects like this, but we really see an opportunity. And I believe that the grid balancing and the need to have more thermal storage or other type of storage on the grid will just increase, at least in the next 5 to 10 years. The rate of implementation of renewables, it's still much higher than the implementation of thermal storage or other type of storage solutions, meaning we're going to need a lot of balancing. And I get the questions a lot. So what's best? You, a battery, other type of thermal energy storage? Well, you're going to need so much from so many different types of technologies. There's no one which is going to take it all. We need all of it to advance, because if not, we cannot put in more renewables to the grid. Getting grid connections today in places which has high penetration of renewable is almost impossible if you're not going to have storage solutions to provide this flexibility, or we have to put a lot of backups in a way that emissions will not reduce. So I really believe that this is the right approach, and we are step by step building our heat as a service offering in more and more countries where we see that the numbers are working out.
It's basically like you co-locate and you say, look, we'll put our thermal storage solution outside the fence or right next to your factory. We'll run a pipe in to provide heat. I want to ask you about that. But one of the things, if I understand, you said that the policy or regulation that's changed in Europe, they were looking at, let's say, storage or battery storage for grid stability and said, we need you to have a battery that can take energy from the grid and put energy back to the grid and make it stable. And you're saying, well, that's one thing, but we want to be able to stabilize the grid, but we also want to provide heat to a customer. We want to do something a little different. And that regulation change, which opens up this new possibility. Okay, for this pet food company, what kind of heat do they use and what do they use it for? Because to your first point, Doron, if you tell me, hey, we've got 13 factories and make pet food all over Europe, my first thought isn't, oh, how do you get your heat? You know, like it's not obvious, but you're saying it's a huge need. What do they use it for? Like, what form do you give it to them?
So the form in this case would be what we call saturated steam. It's a steam which is around 180 to 150 degrees C. Again, we can translate it to Fahrenheit later, but this is, let's say, 400, 500 degrees F.
Okay.
Typically, we see industrial steam, in this case, anything from 200 to 1000 degrees F covers a very big part of the type of heat that is used for those food producers, for pharmaceuticals, for plastics, for, as I said, tobacco, for drinks. And for example, the project we have now in Israel is building this facility for a Heineken-owned brewery. So they're using these type of ranges of steam. The other type we typically see of heat is thermal oil, is heating up thermal oil. Again, this is a very big part of the emissions. We like to talk about the very high temperatures a lot, the 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 degrees F that maybe you need for cement and steel industries. So these are a bit harder to get to abate. Some technologies are looking to these ranges as well, and we are also looking to higher ranges with time. We have something to pay when we go to higher ranges. We're a bit less efficient. We have to store larger volumes. But even before we try to tackle, the hardest to abate parts, the ranges I'm talking to you about between 200, 300 F and 1,000, 1,200 degrees F is at least 50% of these customers' needs are. And they are typically doing it either with gas boilers, which are producing this heat. Some are even using more polluting fuels like coal or diesel to produce this heat. Or they're using type of electrical boilers or heat pumps for the lower grade heat, which could be a good solution in some cases. But an electrical boiler, for example, does not have the option to charge when the cost of electricity is low. And this is the real differentiator, because if we just try to charge or electrify with the average cost of electricity, then we get a pretty high cost of heat, which will be difficult to compete with other fossil fuels. If we just take the lower 4 or 5 hours in each day, and as I said, every year the trend is much lower numbers in some hours, much more volatility, negative pricing, then even the energy storage component becomes critical to good economics. But what we are replacing is, as I said, these customers today, this pet food manufacturer is using boilers. They want to stop using their boilers. They also don't want the dependency and the fluctuations they see on the energy cost. Look what happens in Europe due to the war. In 2022, prices peaked. A lot of these customers suffered very high costs of energy. Some of them have to go bankrupt. Even at the end of 2024, the price of gas doubled in Europe because the agreement to take gas from Russia via Ukraine to Western Europe expired. So these customers want to reduce dependency on gas also in terms of having more firm or more reliable cost of heat. And by signing a long-term agreement with us, they get it. So it's not just about clean, not just about affordable, but also about stability, which is basically what they need to run their businesses. So this is another thing we offer. In some cases, we also install on-site renewables as part of the mix, which gives more hedging and more clean power. So we can charge the storage a little bit from the grid, a little bit from the on-site renewables, and still provide the client the heat that it needs in the same conditions he used to get from his boilers.
So what I'm hearing is a few different things. What I'm hearing is your thermal storage, and we're talking globally here, so whether it's coal or diesel, but most maybe have natural gas boilers. Those boilers don't have control to say, hey, we're only going to heat up when energy's really cheap, maybe in the middle of the night or when people aren't using it. But your thermal storage solution, you do. So that's a cost advantage. There's certainly geopolitical uncertainty, right? There's risk for a whole bunch of reasons, and energy prices can fluctuate. You can lock a client into stable pricing over the long term, and
Right.
they can plan because they know what that cost is going to be, and you de-risk from some of that geopolitical tension. I get that too. And as you said, you're going after a market that's massive. There is the extreme temperature or the highest temperatures, let's say if you're making steel or very energy intensive carbon emitting industries. That's a problem that you're working toward. But you're in this massive middle, right? Where like there aren't good solutions other than, let's say, Brenmiller and thermal storage and other companies working in this space that can say, hey, look, 200 degrees, 400 degrees, 500 degrees, up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We're keeping it Fahrenheit, so like our audience actually, and so I can understand. Never mind our audience, so I can understand. And this is the majority of industry worldwide. Really, like this is where industry plays. Doesn't matter if it's pet food, if it's pharmaceuticals. You're working, you said, I think it's with a company that's partly owned by Heineken in Israel, right? For their bottling. Like this is the sweet spot. And so you're going after a huge market with a huge need. Let's put it in alongside your boilers and you see, right? You see how good the technology is. You see how good we are as a company at servicing it, as responding, build the trust, right? Build the trust in the product, build the trust in what you get. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about your storage solution is that you can be heating up the rocks, storing heat at the same time as you're dispensing heat, right? And that struck me as, I assume, a question that would come up, like, hey, do we have to wait for this thing just to heat up before we can use it? And it sounds like it's continuous. You can draw heat as your business needs it, in the form you need it, at the temperature you need it, at the pressure you need it, exactly the same as what you have today. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's it. The right conditions for the client. And we completely decouple between the charging and the discharging. So we charge when it makes sense to charge, when the electricity rates are lower, when we have the available energy. And we discharge really according to the customer's demand. And because we have this very big bulk of energy there, this pile of rocks, then we can also meet different peaking profiles because we can discharge more or less and be very flexible, both on the charging side, which is important to optimize the grid balancing side, and also on the discharging side when we want to optimize and fully meet the demand on the client, on the heat client side. And we are also building this, if you saw our technology, in modulars, in blocks. We call them big cubes. And we can be quite modular, which is good because, as you said, some customers can start with a certain size, feel comfortable, then scale up the system, and understand they're just getting more modules. A lot of technologies, you say, well, I just bought a 10 megawatt hour system, but I really need a 5 or 1,000 megawatt hour system, which is quite typical in the largest clients that we have. And they're just going to get more modules that will be just, more of the same, which also gives them some confidence because they don't have to worry too much about how this is going to work at scale. So how the technology is developed and designed is really helping to mitigate these risks, to really be flexible into what is the right configuration for each client, and also gives the ability to work towards the full decarbonization in steps, gain the confidence. And there are a lot of companies that are working with us that are very large multinational companies. When I mentioned Heineken, PVF, but there are many more which says, well, I'm going to start at a certain scale, then I'm going to do the full scale with you, or I'm going to start in one site, and then I'm going to deploy it in another 50 sites that we have around the world. So even if you ask where is the scale up going to come from, and I think the route is at least to me quite clear. We start, we get the confidence, and then we deploy in more sites and in larger scales of installations.
Cool. So in Israel, is it gigawatt scale? Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah, we built a production that will go up to 4 gigawatt hour a year scale.
Okay. And Doron, what is it when you say 4 gigawatt hour scale? Like, how do I think about like gigawatt hours? Like that, I don't know, that pet food factory or something. Like, how many hours do
Yeah.
they need?
The smallest one we can sell will be around 10 megawatt hour.
Okay,
And this pet food will be around, let's say, 30, 40 as a medium scale project, small, medium. And as I said, the larger scale projects can go to hundreds, even 500 megawatt hours. And the production capacity we have is 4,000 megawatt hour. But it's
gotcha.
important to say that the line that we built is a fully automated line. It's just one line. We can, in less than 6 months, build another line. And actually, our strategy is not to build these lines only in Israel and ship around the world. The intention is to build them locally, where we have the pipeline to justify it. For a few reasons. One, these things are quite heavy. You don't want to ship them around too much. Shipping costs, they are high. You want to produce them closer to the sites. You want to create local employment. And you want to enjoy local support that comes with that as well. So the idea is to build a line in Europe, in the US, or in any other major area when we have the pipeline to justify it. And as I said, because we already build a fully automated, fully designed line, we can do it quite fast whenever we feel the need is there.
Okay, and so today you have about a $500 million pipeline of projects that are underway. Where is your revenue, or like where was it 2024? Like where are you guys today as a business?
So we started to see revenues in the last couple of years, and these revenues are expected to grow significantly over the last few years. There is a gap between when we sign a project, execute it, and then see the revenues typically at the end. So sometimes you will see a lot of deals signing, and you will see the revenues a year or two after that. So as you said, we have a relatively large pipeline, I would say, and we expect to see more deals signed in the near future. Some already signed, some will be signed, and they will grow both in terms of number of deals and on scale of each deal, I believe. And then as a result, we start to see the revenues going from the millions of dollars that they are today to tens to more than that in the next 3-4 years. So I believe we will start to see the numbers picking up. As I said, we started commercial installations in the last year or two. Before that, we did mainly different beta sites to prove the technology. So the commercial installations have started in the last year or two, and we will see the numbers growing according to that.
I saw a picture of when your company went public, when Brenmiller went public, and the team is in New York City, and you're in Times Square, and there's the billboard in the back, you know, the NASDAQ listing Brenmiller. Yeah. And what was very interesting to me was that the whole team's there, and right in the middle of the picture, standing right in the middle, is you, right? And your dad is the CEO. I assume it's your brother who's the COO, right? You're the chief business officer. But they were a little bit like not exactly in the center. You're building this company with obviously an incredible professionalized team, but it's also you have the family. What is that like?
So let me tell you a bit of background where it comes from. I can say that I'm in this business since the day I was born, but the one which really started working here is my father. My father has been in this business since the 80s. He's been working in solar thermal energy, one of the pioneers to do that, and also many of our teams. So yeah, you saw my brother and me, but we have a very strong team from the previous company, which built hundreds of megawatts of solar thermal plants, were the pioneers in this field, built in Europe and supplied parts in the US. In 2008, the previous company was bought by Siemens for over $400 million. My father stayed as the CEO of this business unit, and all of that was, me growing up during this time and getting into this business via what I see at home. After my father stayed in Siemens for a while and saw that they are taking a bit of a different direction, he really believed that we really need the startup atmosphere to build something new. Because even 12 years ago or 13, we saw that you cannot just put more renewables. There will be a limit to that. We need different energy storage solutions. So he left Siemens, and many of the team followed him, and together we sat down and decided to start something new. We didn't know what. We knew we have a lot of very experienced team, and we started to develop this technology. And it takes a lot of time to develop energy storage technologies. And at a certain point, we decided, at the beginning, we took a lot of our own capital that was part of the sale of the previous company to Siemens. We invested, we said we're going to invest our own money and use our own expertise to develop the technology. And we invested a lot of time and effort in this. And at a certain point, when we felt that we are ready, we IPO'd the company first in Tel Aviv. And at the second stage, when we saw we are starting to go global and we're going to need more access to markets and funding, we also listed in the NASDAQ, which is the picture that you saw. And I'm happy to see that I got a good seat. I'm going to look at the picture again and see my location. But really, my father and the team and my brother, and took a big leap. It's not easy to start something as a family. I think we are more than a family business today, but we still try to keep this vibe alive because we think it's critical for the innovation to continue. And the innovation is key. I mean, even if we have a good product today, if we are market leaders today and we are one of the more, I would say, advanced companies in this field, we need to keep working about the next product, the next generation, to get to higher temperatures, to increase the offering we bring. Because as we said, this innovation is what drives this market, and things are changing very fast. Every year, things are moving faster and faster. We have to keep up, and we work together. We learned how to work together. We separated the roles. Each one is more focused on a specific role. I'm focused on the business side. My father is very strong with the technology side, and my brother is dealing more the investments, the operational activities. So we are with our amazing team leading this effort. So it's been a very, very interesting journey. It's not easy. It's not a field when you can do a nice startup and sell it after 2 years. We have to be really crazy to get into it. But we feel that we are in a good place. We are very happy to get to the market ready when the market is starting to happen, because it could have been different. We are not the only one making the market happen, and we are ready to be here on time. And we are looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah, and of course, that timing piece is everything, right? You have to be ready. A quick aside. So we have a family business too. I'm not in it, but since 1948, my family has had a summer camp, a sleepaway camp here in the States in New Hampshire. And my great uncle started it. My dad and my mom took it over. And then my younger brother was getting ready to take it over from my parents. And that was a moment when, like, my dad, I think, was having a very difficult time with giving the power and the control to his son, And I went up to visit. I think I was working in China at the time. I came home, I went up to visit, and we all went to breakfast. And so, of course, I'm Josh, my brother's Jed, and my dad turned to my brother, and he was like, what's your name? Jeff? And my brother, like, dropped his fork and knife. He's probably like 25, 26 years old, gets up, walks out of the restaurant. I haven't been there I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, what? What just happened? But the family being in a business together, I'm just saying, it's not always, it brings another dynamic to play, right? So
it is, I think it's challenging, but a lot of businesses I know started as family businesses. You go from Siemens to, I think, Microsoft. And in our case, I think what's a bit different, it's not like I'm the fourth generation of a family. We actually sat down in the living room together and said, do we want to do something together or not? My father was out of the previous company, and we sat down, and we were the first employees together, and we selected the company name together, and we said what it's going to do. And I feel like I see myself not as the son which is continuing after his father, although we got a lot of experience and know-how from our father. I see myself as part of this from day one, which was also part of the decision for me to do it. And I was thinking a lot about it. I also did an MBA overseas in Seattle, in Singapore, in France. And I was thinking, well, do I come back or do I do something else? And then think about it. But I felt so much strong, feelings about being part of founding this and making it a success that I said, I have to come back and try to walk, to see it through. As I said, it's a very long, challenging road, and I'm happy to see that we are advancing. It's still difficult, but family business is different. People here are acting differently. People here are part of the family, and I think you really need a strong, very well, intuitive team to make it work, because it's not one of those things when you get people working for 2 years and they want to get their options and see some money at the end. No, they have to work very hard. without great conditions for many years until they start to feel this is working. And this is what, this is maybe a result you can get with people that are feeling like they are part of a team and part of a family. So we are trying to keep this alive as much as we can with all the things that are more challenging that comes, with being part of the family business and having the company carry your name. So yeah.
I love that. And for you in your role, like we mentioned, you've set up projects, or Brenmiller set up projects. You're leading the business effort really all over the world. I mean, it must be, given your background, you said your studies. I mean, are you having fun? Is it fascinating? Like, you're an international business right away. And I think for a lot of Israeli companies, I mean, I know you have Israeli customers. You have a hospital. We mentioned,
Yeah.
the bottling, but you're overseas so fast to grow your businesses. It sounds like you're really also kind of, you personally, from a skill set, maybe personality, are suited to that kind of work.
It's what I like to do. I like to see places and to learn how to make things work. And as I said, we have to be flexible because we have to go to the markets when everything makes sense. Because we are a new technology, a new segment, we cannot just sit in one small market and say, let's work only here. We have to be a bit more agile. We need to understand what's the right place to work. Cannot work all over the place. So we're also trying in the last year or two to focus more and getting more projects more centralized in the same locations. But in the time when you're exploring the markets, exploring the applications, you have to be this side a bit more wild and test and see what sticks. Yes, I mean, for me, it's keeping things very interesting. You're opening up to a lot of different markets and cultures and people, and learning a lot about different energy markets. And there are similarities, but also things that are quite particular to each market. And it's also building partnerships. We are not doing this today alone. We cannot run the world from Israel on the business side, at least. We can develop technology here, but it's all about building partnerships. And we built such a partnership in Europe with the Spanish and German companies that is now leading our European activities. We signed a distribution agreement in the East Coast with a company called the Rock Energy Storage, which is now our local distribution in the Northeast. And getting these people to trust you, especially when it's a new technology, because it's not easy to get those people to invest a lot. They need to get very high level of confidence, like we got in the US. They built a free project with us at SUNY. They got to know us. They fell in love with the technology, and then we found a connection. And it's really working with people at the end. They have to trust me when I tell them it's going to work, and I have to trust them when I give them the right to go and be our face, either in Europe or in the US. So for me, I like those connections, these partnerships, and it's really part of my job that I like. Try not to do too much traveling because I also have 3 small kids that needs me a little bit at home, but I try to balance as much as I can between all these different needs and activities.
Well, Doron, thank you so much for spending some time. And it's really a pleasure to talk with you, and wish you absolutely the best of luck with Brenmiller and what you're building. It's completely super cool.
Thank you very much, Josh. It was great to be here, and I appreciate your time and this podcast.